Yeah, we're. Oh, we lost it. There you go. It still works. So today the topic is on, the title is Biblical Guidelines for Single People. It's actually not me talking, it's a Tim Keller day, so it's sort of getting Tim Keller. It doesn't mean I agree with everything he says, it just means, oh, he can explain it good, so I might as well use it today. But on PowerPoint, I'm providing, like, while he's talking, where he's at, because he kind of talks fast. So
YouTube?
no, not at all.
And this is not going to be as systematic as I gave you last week, partly because, as I think I told you last week, if any of you have ever got any kind of evangelical church background, and if you've probably gone and heard seminars or talks or things like that on the biblical view of dating, and I think I said last week, there is no biblical view of dating. Dating's not mentioned in the Bible. Things were a lot simpler back then. Remember? In other words, when you were 3 years old, somebody, betrothed you to some other person of the other gender who was also 3 years old of a nice family. And there was no problem, you see. Really, the Bible doesn't talk about dating. However, the Bible has plenty of things to say that bear on that relationship that we have in this culture called dating. And therefore, we're going to talk about that tonight, a little bit less systematic of a way. So here's how I want to begin. First of all, I need to kind of turn this away from it. First of all, let me remind you, not all of you were here last week, and it would be helpful, let me remind you everything that Kathy and I, my wife and I, are saying tonight is based on a certain assumption about sex. And let me quickly recap that, basically. We said there's a low view of sex we call Platonistic. Somebody pointed out that Plato wasn't a problem. He had a fine view of sex. It was his disciples. Well, it doesn't matter. Platonistic, all right? And it's true. But the Platonistic view of sex is degrading somehow. It's dirty somehow. And that particular view of sex we talked about as not being a Christian or biblical one. Secondly, we said there's another view of sex that says sex is an appetite. It's just a biological need. We need to have sex, like we need to have food, we need to have rest, and therefore we have to, just like with food, we have to be careful about our diet, we can't eat in an indiscriminate way, and so we can't have sexual relations in an indiscriminate way, but we basically have to have sex when we need to have sex, and we should have sex with people and not be repressed about it and limit ourselves and so on. And I'll call that the middle view of sex. There's a low view, a middle view, and then there's a high view. The high view is the biblical view, and the high view says that it's not only is it not degrading, but it's not just an appetite, but rather the Bible, in a very audacious way, in a very intimate and daring way, says that sex was God's invention to show us, to give us a sign, to show us the union that He built us for, the real union, and that is union with Him. Sex just points to that. And the need we have that we respond to in sex is a need for intimacy and closure and union with someone else. The Bible comes right out and says that marriage and a sexual relationship between a man and a woman is a smaller reflection, a mirror of the relationship between God and the believer. And because of that, you stop and think about it. Does God give you intimacy apart from total commitment? Does He? Does He enter into personal, loving relationship? Does He flood your hearts with His love? Does He enter into intimacy with you? When you say, well, Lord, I want lots of intimacy. I want, every time I come to you, I want to have your heart flooding my heart with love, but I don't want to commit myself to you. I don't want to get up in front of the world when I'm baptized and commit myself to obey.
What?
Is that out of battery on the speaker? We're going to talk. Do you have any light? No light. That thing talk.
Oh.
The battery. Hold on.
Yeah, maybe that.
Will it be loud enough if we don't use speaker, but only use like a speaker from the
I tried it.
Try it. No, it's not.
It's not working.
Just one port that charging.
Otherwise, there's that. I mean, I didn't check the room for your other little speaker. I couldn't find it.
Vibes, as long as it doesn't really matter. I don't care whether you commit yourself to me. He would never do that. He doesn't do that. And so therefore we say, why would it be right for you to say, I want to have sexual intimacy, I want to be naked and vulnerable to you physically, but I don't want to be naked and vulnerable to you in any other way?
See, it's out of battery. Maybe we use a speaker from projector itself.
For the next time. That much is going to be ministry for sure. That's when medicine will go down.
Do you have HDMI?
Yeah.
This is an old computer, so it's
No, it's coming with a sing speaker.
Speaker?
Oh, here you go.
I think I know who helped me. Justin.
He's not here
And also
today.
Win.
Oh, yeah. You want
That's what they did. They
That's what
It was an elder deacon training.
And you saw it and then it just came to you.
Here we go.
You know what? Old speaker with words.
Now, who would? This one. Try it.
I'm willing to bind myself to you so that I have to make my decisions with you. Happy to flood your heart with my...
Okay, well,
That's loud enough.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's probably too loud. It's good enough.
All right, go.
love
Thank you.
and give you all these, peace, love, and groovy vibes, as long as it doesn't really matter. I don't care whether you commit yourself to me. He would never do that. He doesn't do that. And so therefore we say, why would it be right for you to say, I want to have sexual intimacy, I want to be naked and vulnerable to you physically, but I don't want to be naked and vulnerable to you in any other way. I want to have sex with you and then I want to be able to do what I want. I don't want to be bound to you. I don't want to have to make my decisions around you as if we were married. You see, if somebody says, I want to have sex with you because I love you, but I don't want to get married, what he or she is saying is, I don't love you enough to get married. I am not willing to bind myself to you so that I have to make my decisions with you, that I no longer have that independence. You see, I want to be vulnerable and naked to you physically, but I don't want to be vulnerable and naked to you in other ways. And we said last week, just as ridiculous as it would be to say, God, I want your intimacy without commitment, it is silly to talk about sexual intimacy, sexual union, without every other kind of union. Paul says, to be physically one and not to be socially and legally and emotionally and every other way one is a monstrosity. It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't. And since sex is covenant cement, sex is a way of continually re-cementing and continually renewing that binding total life commitment. That's what a covenant is. A legal thing, a moral thing, a spiritual thing
Sex is the ability to continually recreate that covenant and to say, I belong completely and exclusively to you. And if you use sex outside of a covenant of total commitment, what you do is you destroy your ability to entrust yourself to other people. That is what we said last week, and that's the assumption. Now, we'll have to say something else at the end of this time, because I got about 99 questions about masturbation at the end of last week. And you say, you're gonna, and then everybody said, you're going to talk about living a single life and not talk about masturbation this week? And I said, oh, that's all right, I will. So let me say something about that too. If you don't mind, do you have something to say on it too at this point? Yeah, all right, I will. Here, first of all, you know what all it probably cost somebody millions and millions of government dollars to come up with this research statistic, but 90% of all single people masturbate and the other 10% lie. Have you heard that one? You hadn't heard that one? Look, there's nothing in the Bible about masturbation. Those of you with a church background may have heard that there's something deep in the Old Testament about it, and there isn't. There's a story about a man who married a woman and then did coitus interruptus, pulled away at the last minute and spilled semen on the floor because he did not want to bear children through her. He wanted to be married and have sex, but didn't want to have children with her. And it was his responsibility to raise up children. And he was struck dead, not because it had anything to do with sex or masturbation or anything like that, because he wouldn't obey God. And it has nothing to do with masturbation. There's nothing in the Bible about it. But here's the problem with masturbation, if there's a problem. And that is in the passage we read last week, 1 Corinthians 7. 1 Corinthians 7, it says, the wife's body is not her body, but it's her husband's. And it says, the husband's body is not his body, but it's his wife's. Got you nervous there, right? The first half of the sentence got you nervous, but it's reciprocal, all right? And that is a very, very important passage and extremely fundamental for a biblical understanding of sex, because it's saying is your sexual capacity is not really for you. It really isn't like eating. Your sexual capacity is not for you. The reason that God invented sex was not so you could get pleasure, but so that you could give pleasure. And people who have experienced the apex of godly, married, sexual passion know this. The height of sexual pleasure is the pleasure of giving pleasure. The height of sexual satisfaction is to see that you are giving someone satisfaction, and that is the most satisfying and the most arousing thing possible. It has nothing to do, sexual capacity is not there for you to take a climax, but for you to give it. Your body does not belong to you. The other person's body does not belong to him or her. Do you understand that? I remember one time early on when I grasped this, and I was doing counseling as a pastor, and I remember there was 2 or 3 couples in a row that came to me and said, we hate sex, it's terrible, it's bad. They were married couples, and they said, our sex lives are terrible, the other person doesn't satisfy me. And I said, look, I'm not a therapist, but I've been reading 1 Corinthians 7 verse, and I wonder if we could try this. I would like you to have sex regularly, whether or not you feel like it for the next week. Have sex as regularly as you can agree on, but agree and have sex. And when you make love, please don't worry at all about whether you get any pleasure. Just worry about whether you're going to give pleasure. Don't even concentrate on how you feel, or whether you're moving along, or whether you're being aroused. Just say, my job right here is to bring the other person as much satisfaction as possible. Can you do that? And they looked at me and they said, sounds really weird, but all right. And so after a week, I said, how was it? And I saw them after a week, and they said, strange. And after 2 weeks, I said, how was it? And they said, better. And after 3 weeks, 4 weeks especially, they said, this is great. And I said, well, according to the Bible, all you've been doing is actual mutual masturbation. Oh, yes, you've been having intercourse, but you see what's been going on is you've been sitting there saying, am I getting enough? Now, the problem with masturbation is that it's completely focused on you. Completely. It is horribly self-conscious. It's exactly the way sex is not supposed to operate. And it doesn't at all, and my wife will probably say something too about this, but we can just speak personally, it doesn't really prepare you for married sex, because all it does is make you incredibly self-conscious about how your body operates. and how important it is for you to be getting a certain amount of pleasure. When the best thing, listen, friends, in every other area of life, the best thing you can possibly do is forget yourself. You know how you do your best piano playing, you musicians, is to forget yourself and just to think about the music. Not worry about whether the people are digging on you, but worry about whether or not, you're not worried at all. All you care about is the music and the beauty of the music. See? Same thing with preaching, not that, or I guess, thankfully, hardly any of you are preachers, I hope. The worst thing you can possibly do is get up there and wonder about what you're getting out of it. You got to forget all about that. You got to forget about yourself. Instead, you say, am I able to get the point across? Same thing with sex. The worst thing you do is say, am I getting mine? Instead, you have to be saying, how can I give satisfaction? And that's what's wrong with masturbation, frankly. It's not because I can point to a verse and say, you see, it's a sin every time you do it. I can't say that. I know it's addicting. I know it's also something that actually takes you away from reality, because masturbation virtually always involves fantasy. And since it's addicting and it brings you into a fantasy world, into a world that never will exist, ever. Because you see, most people aren't built like the person in your fantasy. And you probably never will find people like that. Or you're thinking about somebody that is unreachable. Or you're thinking about somebody from the past. In other words, you're addicted to something that takes you away from reality, and you think that's healthy? No, you see, for all kinds of reasons, it takes you away from God's purpose for sex. And as a result, I say it's an unhealthy thing, it's a good thing to resist. But I'm not saying, here's the verse, and here's what's wrong. Now, you said you wanted to advise. Did I take everything?
He took most of what I was going to say, but one thing I'll add, and those of you who have struggled with this know this from your own experience, and speaking from my own experience as someone who got addicted to masturbation very early, like about 12, I thought I had invented it. I think maybe a lot of people discover it accidentally and think, gee, I wonder if I could market this. I mean, does anybody else know about this? But it leads to a lot of loneliness. It makes the loneliness worse. It makes the loneliness harder to bear. It doesn't, because it is so diametrically opposed to what God meant sex to be, the real union between your soul and another person's soul. There's nobody else there. When the climax comes, sure, there's a tingle, but there's nobody else there. And the bitter loneliness that follows the masturbatory experience, I think, is probably a better argument, or just as good an argument, for avoiding it than practically any other one. If you didn't have a theological or spiritual reason, just the fact that it leaves you feeling so bad in one sense, so lonely, so wondering whether or not anyone will ever be there, for you, really, is a good argument against it. And another thing, another good reason that I found, just speaking personally, to try to get a handle on this whenever it was such a problem in my life, is because it's kind of, it's an easily measurable victory. A lot of times in your spiritual life you're talking about, am I more patient? Am I more kind? Am I more this or that? You know whether you've got more victory over a problem that has mastered you in this